an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering One Piece, episodes 182 and 183. In these episodes, Luffy finally faces off with Eneru/Enel. And it turns out that I was right about that rubber thing. But there are other ways to use lightning that I didn't really think about. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much, Gabriela, for commissioning this episode. Oh, I just saw Gabriela is in the chat saying I'm feeling like shit, so I might not comment much, but I wanted to be here. Hi, Gabriela. Well, thank you for commissioning. I'm sorry you feel shitty, but I hope that you feel better soon. I hope it's not the vid. Make sure to go get tested. Every time anybody says anything about feeling sick, I'm just like, did you get tested yet? Just immediately. So yeah, these episodes were really fun, actually. I was very pleasantly surprised at the about face in storyline, not even in storyline, but like overall motivation for the White Berets. I wasn't really expecting there to be like more layers there. I just kind of thought that they were going to be Eneru's thugs. And it really... When they left the story, I thought that we were going to come back to them as another set of baddies that we were going to have to deal with after Eneru was dealt with. Like a small time, kind of like if you've actually read Lord of the Rings. In Lord of the Rings, they deal with fucking Sauron. But then they go back to the Hobbiton and there's just absolute havoc has broken out, and they have to deal with this like kind of small time crisis that's going on. That's sort of what I was expecting, I think, was that we would have our big clash with Eneru, and then we would think it was all over. We would return to this little island, and these White Berets were going to be like another thing to fucking deal with. And instead, it looks like they're going to be straight up allies. And I'm into it. And I'm also like suspicious of it. I feel like, okay, yeah, they're straight up allies for now. But they just don't really seem like reliable allies. They seem like the kind of allies that they really need to like strictly agree with every decision you're making in order to have your back. It's not at all a sort of unconditional thing. So... Oh, Seraphim says, good old scouring of the Shire. Is that what it's called? I don't really I'm not in a lot of fandoms because, spoilers, I have not actually read Lord of the Rings. So, that's when I said, if you've read Lord of the Rings, I really should have been like, if you have read Lord of the Rings and or been enough in like the fandom that you have heard other versions of things. But, yeah, the fandom for Lord of the Rings feels like it would probably be even more intense than for Song of Ice and Fire in terms of people who know backstory. And I just I feel overwhelmed at the mere idea of the Silmarillion existing. So the Lord of the Rings has always sort of felt like, I'm good, you know? Seraphim called me a fake nerd. Am I a nerd? I guess I'm a nerd. I don't think of myself as a nerd because for me... If you want to be like a proper nerd, you also have to be like a real gamer. You know, that's one of the qualifiers. And I'm not. So I always just sort of took myself out of that. And I always sort of thought you had to be into either comics or manga. One of the two things. And I'm not in either of those either. However, I mean, I set up like a fandom inside a fandom. So I guess I'm a super nerd. Anyway. Back to the episode. So, yeah, the episode begins, 182, with everybody on Skypiea talking to each other about what could potentially be going on, because there is this really spectacular arrival of, what is her name again? Conus. As she is heading towards them on her little jet ski. And they begin firing on her, the White Berets, with arrows. And I had forgotten that she had basically broken the rule and was still seen by everybody in this town as an outlaw, a blasphemer as well. And so the fact that they reacted with arrows, I was genuinely surprised by, because I sort of thought we were going to see them aiming for her and then realizing that she wasn't one of the, I don't know, maybe one of the Shandorans, and be like, oh, hold your fire. But no, it turned out like it was meant for her, genuinely. And she rides this jet ski right onto the island. It hits the captain of the Green Berets, and like, not only does it hit him and toss him into a wall, but he somehow outpaces it and reaches the wall, and then after smacking him initially, it hits him again, which I just found really, really funny. And when the guys in the dub yell "Captain," it sounds exactly like they're yelling "God damn." So it was just like him getting hit once, "God damn!" And he gets hit again, "God damn!" But yeah, so... Oh, sorry. Seraphim says, the Berets, my read was they try to do whatever they think keeps the people of Skypiea safe, even if it meant toadying up to Eneru to try and keep him from blowing chunks of the island away. Yeah, and I guess that's what I mean about like being unsure about their alliance later. Because, you know, what initially started the whole thing with the White Berets is the fact that they came in without paying their fee, right? I don't know. I just have a feeling that the White Berets would be the types that are like, I'm going to help you take Eneru down for sure. Same side, definitely against this guy. But as soon as they're done, the White Berets are like, okay, but you have to pay that fee though. So we're definitely arresting you still. And I appreciate your help. Eneru is gone. Really, thank you. But also, you broke the law and you still had. So I guess I see them as kind of like a Stannis, you know? Somebody who's gonna be such a hard ass and not really understand why people around them are like, for real, dude? But anyway, so yeah, Conus is here. And what we get for pretty much the like first half of this episode, I say first half, I'm looking at it now, and it's not until about 16 minutes in that everybody begins to actually listen to her. So yeah, we're pretty much the whole episode working on convincing these people that they need to evacuate the island. And it's the kind of thing that I think would have rung really false to me as a kid watching this. Because as a child, I was still under the incredibly comforting delusion that human beings are rational creatures who will do what needs to be done to keep themselves and one another safe from a threat that is very easily identifiable, avoidable, and could wreak absolute havoc on a huge portion of the population. This is about COVID. And these people don't want to listen. They genuinely do maybe he'll change his mind, which it was so perfect, honestly, you guys. That is the exact attitude. People don't want to do anything to upset the order of stuff because it might just work out on its own. And so, well, it's like the people that are like, well, we're all going to get COVID eventually anyway, so we may as well just go on with our lives. And act as if, like, if we all get it, then we'll all be immune and it won't be a problem anymore. And it's not how it works. And this dude just low-key being like, I mean, I know you say that he wants to do this. And I'm not even saying I don't believe you. Maybe he does. But what if tomorrow he doesn't anymore? I absolutely cannot. So, yeah, this entire, like, interaction with these people it's kind of fun, honestly, because Conus has been, I don't even want to say passive. I think that a part of me is tempted to call her passive because she isn't that outgoing and she, like, kept quiet a lot. But I feel like really what we saw of her when she kept quiet a lot was somebody who was struggling with an internal conflict about turning these people in and not wanting to. And so I could see it actually being more a reflection of her being uncomfortable than her actual personality. I think that what we have seen since then proves that she's not really passive, you know? It's just she was expected to do something, and that's honestly, for a lot of us, we do just kind of do what we're told in terms of laws and things like that. But it was really fun to see her go from somebody who was just, who felt a lot more like she was going to be the side event, and her father, Pagaya, it's that, right? That he was going, I thought that it was going to be him being like the sort of thrust of the resistance of this pair, and that she would follow behind him and be like participating and learning and eager, but that he was going to be the one sort of taking the lead, because both of them did feel like kind of passive. So even though he is such a cinnamon roll, him doing that for me had felt like it would work. But now that I have gotten to know the two of them a little bit better, her not only realization that what was going on with Eneru wasn't what it was made out to be, and then her father apparently being killed, is her motivation for just completely going over the edge and being like, fuck all of y'all. So yeah, she rides her fucking jet ski into the island, and she has a fucking bazooka with her, and a guy tries to come at her, and apparently, like, in the length of time that all of this has been taking place, she has developed fucking spidey senses, and she turns on him with this bazooka in a slow-mo movement that is, like, extremely badass, and I am here for the glow-up. I am. You know what I'm realizing, too? Talking about, like, interpreting her as passive initially, I think that some of that just comes from what she looks like. You know, she's this, like, little dainty blonde with the, like, the antenna and the wings that make her look extremely girly and feminine. And I'm realizing that I'm associating that appearance with those traits, which is, like, a hugely problematic and also extremely common thing. So just a moment of self-reflection there, because sometimes you see that in yourself and you're just like, ooh, yikes. That's kind of, you know, oh, because she's a white blonde, she's inherently seen as more passive and not a threat? Why, yes. Yep, sorry. So anyway, the fact that she has decided that she's going to come in here and basically yell at everybody until they take her advice, I'm into it. If I could be Conus standing on a beach screaming at a crowd of people about COVID with a mask on, I would. And a kid throws a tomato at her. Two things about the tomato that are amazing. One, that Conus just fucking stands there and doesn't even, like, she doesn't jump, she doesn't cry out, she doesn't react almost at all, which is really difficult to pull off. You have to be in a focused frame of mind for somebody to hit you with a piece of rotten fruit and you not be like, who the fuck did that? So first, she just keeps herself completely under control. But secondly, she turns and looks at the kid who threw it, and the kid immediately apologizes. And I loved that so much. Because this kid is like, almost when it hits her face, we see his face, and it almost seems like the kid is surprised to have hit her. Like he was genuinely just chucking it in a moment of like frustration. And then it actually like connects, and the kid is like, oh God, that was supposed to like sort of splash at her feet in a threatening way. It wasn't supposed to hit her in the actual face. But the fact that the kid's immediately like, oh, I'm really sorry. I just found that very funny. Florian says, want to know what? In the manga, it was a rock. They changed it for the anime. I mean, hitting her with a rock, don't get me wrong, that's a lot worse. But also, it doesn't feel bad enough to need to change it. We've got people being punched to death. Like, why is the rock the deal breaker here? It's because she's a girl, right? That's got to be like kind of all it is. Like, if somebody chucked a rock at Luffy, I don't see them changing it. Do you guys? I feel like it has to be just like who Conus is. And that's, frankly, that's smacking of what exactly I was just talking about 2.5 minutes ago. So, highly questionable. Anyway, but yeah, so she is like going off on everybody. They're trying to argue with her about why maybe we don't actually need to worry about this. And finally, she starts screaming at them all about the potential for what could happen if they don't stay or if they do stay versus leaving, because their concerns about leaving, while valid, are still less bad than what would happen if they stayed. And the picking up of the bazooka, she shoots this thing upward, and it's like a ray of energy. And I wasn't entirely sure what this was supposed to mean, because she shoots up, and it almost feels like somebody just shooting into the ceiling of like a bar in a Western. And I think it's just supposed to be in order to get their attention. But I was hoping that it was going to be, I don't know, that there would be something about this weapon that she would be able to use to prove what she was saying about Eneru is actually true. Florian says kids shouldn't throw rocks, I think. Ryan says maybe it's because a kid did it, so they don't want the young audience to throw rocks. Seraphim says never try to figure out what standards and practices thinks. I guess you guys are probably right. The fact that it's like a kid that, But again, we have kids doing all sorts of shit in this show, and the fact that this is the thing that they're like, no, I'm just... It's a weird place to draw the line. Gus says it's a burn bazooka. Remember when Viper changes his ammo to a breath dial with gas? Right, but like she just shoots it into the air. So is it meant to be like I'm willing to take a shot at Eneru? And that's her sort of like proving her stance? I'm just not really sure what point she's trying to make using it. And I was waiting for the connection when she's speaking for her to say something about like, see the way that this blast did blah, blah, blah. That's what Eneru is going to do to you. But she doesn't ever really say that. She just says, she shoots this into the air and then just says, he can make us despair, but we don't have enough time and you can't just stand here waiting for a miracle. So it just felt sort of unconnected. Okay, everybody's saying to get their attention, and that was like my first guess, but I don't know. It felt like she had their attention. I guess they all just start sort of, trying to disagree with her, so it's to shut them up. But anyway, so yeah, she manages to finally get through to them in this moment. She's like, you can't just stand around. At least try, because you're going to look back and realize that you could have done something. And everybody immediately flees in one of those like, those moments of, we are implying that there's a lot of motion happening here. But what we're actually doing animation-wise is that somebody drew a very large image of a bunch of people running, and we're just slowly panning across the still image to give the impression of movement. And that's fine. So then there's a bunch of parents who are on the beach talking to her, beach in quotes, and they're like, hey, our kid was in that squad. Do you know what has happened to him? Like, what do you have any news? We haven't even talked to him in like 6 years. And she says that she doesn't know. And they're asking, like, what have they been doing for 6 years? What have they even been up to? And she's standing there looking red in the face, like she's embarrassed at the fact that she doesn't have more answers for them. And I really felt for her here, honestly, because you don't, like, sometimes being embarrassed doesn't logically make a lot of sense, but you're being confronted by people who are grieving, and you have a suspicion, I'm sure, that their kids are probably dead, but you can't say that for sure, and you don't want to hint to, because that might cause a different kind of panic. So you kind of just have to clam up, and that feels really weird in the face of genuine concern that these people have for their kids. So, yeah, she's in the midst of shrinking away from them, kind of like, oh my God, I don't know what to tell them. And then here comes the white beret. We will look into this issue. And they're like, you know, she's basically taking her side publicly in this moment. And he directs all of the parents away. And then he says to her, yeah, I know what Eneru is capable of. And I am really pretty sure that you're telling the truth. He is that kind. And he says in the subtitle, and that Enel, because it's a different name, is that kind of man, which really, you know, it's not even God anymore. It's just, though, we know he's a dude. So it turns out that this is a group of people that decided to pretend to, like, agree and worship / serve Eneru, but in fact they were really looking out for the people. Now, I don't know how much I really like buy that was their overall mission, considering what winds up happening with like Luffy and his crew. That did feel a little bit more personal to me than just like, oh, we're looking out for the good of the people. But you know what? You can have an overall noble intention and still get caught up in the pettiness of everyday interactions. So I'm not too mad about it. I just wanted to point it out that it's like the kind of thing where if I were to rewatch those episodes and know that they were sort of like in on things, it might hit a little weird. But anyway, yeah, it turns out that they are going to absolutely do what they need to do to get everybody off of this island. He's not going to like report on her or go up there. And he says that so I'm going to read this verbatim. I won't let what happened in Burka happen here. And she's like, what is that? And he says, a sky island in the far southeast where Enel was born and raised. I heard that it disappeared without a trace 6 years ago. And I had asked, like, where is this dude from? And we didn't really get like it was just, oh, he came from another island. And other than that, we didn't really get anything. I'm assuming that the like priests that he brought were the same, like from the same place. But to find out that he destroyed his homeland before he left, that really adds a new dimension to him. It's a systematic thing then, you know? I sort of forget that the island that we are visiting isn't all of Skypiea, because in my head, Skypiea as like a cluster of I don't know, A cluster of nations, perhaps, feels so much more intricate than we really need. But I know that it's been mentioned that there are other islands. So I should have sort of considered how much the scale of his destruction was going to be. And I have been thinking of it in terms of just the little island that we're visiting. But would Eneru just start with that island and then make his way through all of them and, like, just fry each and every single one up? Because it sounds like that's the plan, is straight up, I don't want any more sky nations of any kind anymore. They're unnatural, they're fucked up, it's weird, we're not doing that. So I'm going to end all of them. I just didn't really, like, consider the scope of it beyond this one little group. And I don't know, for some reason that makes it feel more threatening to me. It feels like, just, I don't know, it hits different. Oh, right. Okay, so Seraphim says, it is all of Skypiea. That's the name of this Sky Island. There are just other Sky Islands. Burka is not part of Skypiea. Okay, so Skypiea is one nation-ish, and then Burka was a whole other one. So maybe it's just Skypiea, but the others he might leave? Perhaps? Florian says, I think you would call all the different islands the White Sea. Oh, I think somebody did say that for the first time this episode, because I don't remember hearing the White Sea earlier. Maybe they said it and I just didn't notice, but it hit me for some reason this episode, and I was like, that's kind of a cool name. Okay, so, well, regardless, the fact that he just absolutely fucking eliminated his entire, like, home island is pretty bonkers. You know, that's just, it's one thing to just be like, oh, I'm going to be a conqueror, and I'm going to go through and take down different, like, villages and subject them to my whims in the way that Crocodile did, for example. But when it's, like, your own place where you are from, where presumably, like, your family is, that's a cold-blooded in a different way. So, yeah. Anyway. So, yeah, he, obviously, the timing of that having happened 6 years ago, that this is like what he did right before he showed up to rule them. And he says nobody was able to stand before the kind of power that he had. So that was why people called him God, because there was nobody could fight him. He just was absolutely dominant. And he says, we used to serve Gonfall. We believed that even if it appeared that we betrayed the divine squad by obeying God and staying on the island, there was a way to protect people. And then he says that it didn't work out, and it was, like, pitiful and shameful, and obviously we were really wrong, and seems to be ashamed of himself. And she has to be like, dude, you did a pretty solid job, to be honest, and here you are helping evacuate everybody, like, at the 11th hour. I would say that shit worked, so don't be so hard on yourself. So at this point, we cut to Eneru, and him and Nami have been intercut in the whole saga unfolding on Sky Island. It's just, you know, Conus lands, talks to everybody, we cut to him, and him sort of laughing at her efforts, you know, being very dismissive. The fucking laugh on this guy is so over the top. You know whose voice he actually reminded me of a few times in this was the guy who plays Gaston in Beauty and the Beast. It's that, like, extremely... generic is the wrong word, but he has the kind of voice that you hear and you're like, handsome man. That's a handsome man's voice. And that's not ever necessarily true, but it has that sort of, like, quality to it. And once I realized that he reminded me of Gaston, I started to see it a little bit, you know. Gaston's superiority complex is of a different nature, for sure. But it is still there. And he really probably would argue that he was like, if not God, pretty close. And it does expect worship from everyone around him. So, I don't know. I think there's a lot of parallels there. I checked and they aren't the same guy. But anyway, so yeah, we have had like our interactions between him and Nami. And we see how Luffy is rushing toward them. He's got, what's his name? Is it Pietro? And the little girl riding on his back. And they are heading towards Eneru at top speed. And Robin wakes up for a moment and is very dazed and is trying to figure out what she can do. She's like, I can't carry everybody, but we definitely need to get out of here. And we see her like looking up the beanstalk. So we have that time limit going on as well. So Luffy is sprinting towards Eneru. And Eneru finally clocks the fact that there are more people alive than he thought. And he's like, this isn't what my prophecy was. I didn't foresee this number. And that really salts my butt. I don't know if that's a saying. I just kind of made that one up. So I hope that works for you guys. And he starts to get really irritated. And as all of that is going on, Nami is really struggling to sort of keep the conversation in a place that feels like balanced enough that he doesn't absolutely lose it on her. But she's also trying to distract him a little bit. She's rooting for Luffy, obviously, and so excited that Luffy is actually alive once she realizes he's there. But there was just something like really... I felt for Nami so much being the only one that is okay and still alive in this situation with Eneru, and having to manage his insanity and ego because she's just got to stay alive and hope that she can do something eventually. It just felt like a lot of pressure. It reminded me of like, you know, women having to manage like abusive husbands or boyfriends by keeping them from getting angry at them. And it was just very, you know, I don't know. So Luffy basically goes right up to him and it's like, what the fuck did you do to my friends? And Nami leans over and says, Luffy, be careful. But Eneru turns and looks at her, and she like jumps up and covers her mouth. I'm assuming that the reason that she's so scared isn't just that she got involved at all, but that she like sort of showed her hand about the fact that she cares about Luffy and like might be rooting for him. But instead of taking her to task for any of that, Eneru cuts right to, I see that the people of Skypiea are panicking. And they're going to try and like get out of here. But I wonder how far they're going to be able to get before I do something to them. And Luffy, throughout all, is just yelling, what makes you God? To which Eneru says, you'll find out soon enough. So Luffy sails up with his big rubber arm, and Eneru says, oh, you're not a regular person. Well, that's kind of fun. Maybe I will be able to have a good time here for a second because it'll be a real fight. And Luffy is like, all right, come. And he says, yeah, you're about to see what makes me God. And he releases a blast of electricity directly at Luffy because Luffy is hot, like in midair. Eneru does this in this moment of like, when you see his arm, it looks like he is putting his arm through a wall because the energy coming out, the like electricity, is so dense that it's forming like an actual solid object for a minute, you know? So he takes a shot at Luffy. And of course, the smoke clears, and Luffy is still there. And Eneru is like, oh, I'm pretty impressed that you were able to dodge that. And everybody's like, wait, he dodged it? And then he does another 60 million volts. And we very much see that Luffy is still standing there, that it hits him directly, head on. And then again, smoke clears and he is still standing there. And Eneru is like, it's really kind of fun actually, because he's standing looking at Luffy. Then there's a crackle. He disappears and he reappears floating above Luffy's head. And if there's not really an indication up to this point that he is at all perturbed at the fact that Luffy is resisting his attacks. He just seems to think it's like his aim was a little off. Like, it's just not bothering him at all. He's still smiling. And he says 100 million volt. When he puts his hand down, he like touches Luffy. Sends this out. And as it's like blinding everybody, Nami is realizing, oh, right, he's made of rubber. I guess it makes sense that he wouldn't be affected by this. And then we go back to Luffy, and he looks at Eneru and just is like, enough, okay? And he shoves the man off him. And then we cut to Eneru's face of absolute sheer abject panic and terror. I have to be honest, I was really surprised that we got to see him be that freaked out. We have, of course, gotten to see bad guys begin to realize who they are fucking with. They will have a moment of like, oh, he's a better fighter than I expected. Or, a little bit faster than I am, but I'm stronger. We'll hear them like having their little internal monologue about what an opponent this person turns out to be after all. But even in those moments, they don't outwardly show that they are realizing they're matched, And Eneru absolutely losing his cool in such it's very clear. I was really not expecting the man who has been so smug and like cool as a cucumber this entire time to completely unravel like that. And we've seen other people who had been unbeatable up till this point. So everybody was so certain that they were unbeatable. So it's not like he experiences more of that than any of them. I think it really might just have to do with his personality and the fact that I kind of get the sense, and this is completely fabricated, and I will admit that this is basically like going to be a headcanon, but I'm going to say it anyway. I see like so we have what's the name of the fish guy? We have him, we have Crocodile, we've got all of like the different like Mr. One and Miss Christmas and whatever, but I'm going to just count like the big head honchos. All of them, I feel like I would believe that they were like fighters even without their powers. They would be people who would scrap. They would be people who would get into it in a bar, like just people who are going to be physically aggressive. And there is something about Eneru that really makes me think he does not know how to fight, and he never thought he needed to learn because he has had this power. And so he doesn't have to worry about it. And also he has the mantra, which means that he can like foresee Luffy's moves. And so fighting might not necessarily be in his wheelhouse. And again, I don't have any evidence to support this. I think a lot of it might come from the fact that Eneru looks like a private school kid. He just has that kind of face. So I am going to put him as sort of like entitled and spoiled. And therefore, somebody who didn't really like work that hard to get where they are. They just managed to be like born with luck of a certain kind. And that informed everything that they did. So yeah, I like the idea that it's just that he really just personally has that kind of ego, and it's that fragile. Crocodile. Luffy kept coming back from like the dead, and Crocodile just kept being like, "Oh man, this guy again." He doesn't like flip out. It's just genuinely like, I just dealt with this. I don't want to do this again, you know? So anyway, he stops and shakes himself and is like, I need to calm down. I might not be able to like use my normal power on him, but what he does to my physical body isn't going to matter anyway. And also, I have mantra. And as he's thinking this, Luffy lands a kick to his gut. So apparently, it's not just that Luffy is resistant to the electricity because he is rubber. The fact that he is rubber causes the electricity to be a solid, essentially. And he can kick it when somebody else's attack would just go right through him. Is that right? I don't have any problem with that, just for what it's worth. But I just wanted to make sure that I was getting this correct. Seraphim said, Eneru legit thought he was a god and had never met anyone who could ever stand against his power. This just rocked the very underpinning of his entire concept of reality, i.e. he is the center of existence. Now, see, I don't think he legit thought he was a god. I think he just keeps saying that because he's got a superiority complex in general. And he's like, I may as well be a god because you guys are pitiful. But I don't think he really thought he was a god. I think it was just like, you know what I mean? I feel like there was a lot of what's the word I want? It was the kind of, honestly, the kind of mentality of somebody who calls people sheeple. Just, I know things and I can do things and I get things that you guys just don't get and you never will get it. Because, so, yeah, God, I guess, to you. There's, you know what I mean? But anyway, so yeah, Luffy kicks him. And he has this moment of like blood coming out of his mouth. He is down for the count. And really seems like this might be it. Just this one kick. Which I have to be honest. If it was the end of the fight. If Luffy just nails him in the gut this one time. And that is it. And Eneru goes down. That would be absolutely hysterically funny to me. And I kind of want it. Sort of reminding me of that scene in Raiders of the Lost Ark where a guy comes out, has like these, sabers and is like spinning them and he just pulls out a gun and shoots the guy and you're waiting for this big fight, but you just don't get it. I won't lie. When it turns out that there is still going to be a big fight, I was a little bit bummed just because the comedic, it almost, actually, now that I stop and think about it, there was that guy, the laughing hyena? The hyena? Was he just called the hyena? And that's kind of what happened with him and Luffy. Luffy fights him the once, and this guy is like a bitch and gets knocked down immediately. So maybe it wouldn't have been quite as funny in the context of that having kind of just happened. But, I don't know. Maybe it would. I stand by it. So anyway, then we go into the next episode. And this episode is when we get to meet the ship that he has built called Maxim, which is funny for a variety of reasons. And it turns out that also he can travel through gold because metal conducts electricity. And I thought that was a pretty neat idea. I liked that a lot, actually. But yeah, the one thing that I will say gets a little bit irritating, and I don't have a problem with it in principle, but I feel like maybe there could have been a more elegant way to do this. I don't know. But throughout this fight, we just have Nami on the sidelines explaining to us why certain things are working and why certain things are happening. And just like making these statements like, Luffy might be the only man in the world that can beat Eneru. Girl, I know. I get it. We don't need this whole thing like regurgitated. We're watching it. Just let us watch it. You don't need to make a comment about every single little thing. But it's fine. So, yeah, this fight between the two of them. The first thing that I didn't realize would be a potential weapon Eneru could wield. He can heat things up using the electricity. And that was really interesting to me, that there was another use for it outside of just shocking him. The heat is like a secondary thing. There's obviously heat that comes off of electricity or lightning, but heating another object and then him reacting to that object, I mean, that is a kind of neat workaround that I wasn't thinking of. And so, yeah, he uses this like gold weapon and it's coming at Luffy, and you previously saw him fight with that and it not work. So you're kind of like, what is he doing? And then all of this, this gold like drips off of the weapon onto the deck of the ship and begins to burn through it to demonstrate just how hot it is. And it was pretty cool. So Luffy grabs it to stop him and his hands begin to burn. And I was just like, that it had not occurred to me to be able to do something like this. And so the fact that he had a reaction to it at all, I was just kind of like, oh, that feels kind of like cheating, but it's not. It's just being smart. So, yeah, Luffy getting burned, like, obviously he was not ready for that either. And the thing that Luffy is not really adapting well to is the fact that this guy can predict his movements. So what Luffy has to do, pretty interesting, to be honest. Luffy has to enter a state in which he is reacting purely by instinct and without actually thinking. Because there's a really, I don't know, kind of amazing moment, in my opinion. There, it's a moment that almost felt like the show was lampshading something. When Luffy does the Gatling gun, it does look like his body has stretched into a bunch of different arms. But what it's meant to be is that it's just his regular two arms, and they're just going back and forth in and out so fast that it seems like a bunch of different hands pounding on your face at the same time. And in fact, it's just the two, and that's how fast he is. But it does look to you as a viewer like he has multiple arms. And so I loved when Eneru grabs his wrists and stops him and yanks him down and says, it's not as if you grew multiple arms. It just sort of felt like the animator or the story writer being like, okay, we got a lot of comments about the fact that Luffy can grow multiple arms. And that's not what's happening here. And clearly, we need to actually explicitly say that's not what's happening here. Because people are completely misunderstanding, and we keep seeing it over and over again in the fandom. So it is time to put this issue to rest, and we are going to have somebody say it. Just say it on screen. And I, for one, appreciate it, because I definitely fell into the trap of thinking it was multiple arms a few times. So anyway, he gets the better of Luffy in this moment, grabbing him and basically like shoving his face into the deck, and walks away and is like, all right, so it's time for me to start recreating the world. And he's talking about his ship that he like sort of stands on this throne and hooks his own body to, so that his electricity powers the entire ship. And it's pretty cool looking, honestly. It's raising into the air, and on the outside, we still have Ayla, or Isa. It's Isa, isn't it? And Pierre watching. And Pierre, I think, does something to like insinuate maybe we should step in. And she's like, we're not messing with a duel. Like, this is something that's really sacred to warriors, and we don't do that. And I have to say, this is one of those things that it certainly feels a little bit convenient because we just can't have them be interrupted, because what good would it do? And also, it might make things too easy. But also, I actually sort of believed it based on the culture that she's been brought up in. It feels like the kind of thing that she would really believe. And I was fine with it. It was the kind of thing that I think if the character were slightly different, like if there were the kid who threw a tomato, for example, at Conus, if that character were to say something like this, I would have been like, bullshit. No, whatever. You just needed a reason for this kid to not do anything. And you decided to write this line. But with this little girl, I was like, okay, no, though. For you, I believe it. This works for me. But yeah, so he starts to power up the ship. And he's just talking about the land of endless birth. He hasn't mentioned the bell that he is seeking. So I'm assuming that is still like a priority of some kind. But it doesn't really seem to be at the top of his mind. I was sort of waiting for him to mention that here, and he doesn't say anything about it. So the ship begins to lift off, and Nami is like yelling at Luffy, you have got to go and beat him. And then she's thinking about the variety of things that could happen. If we kill him, he is the one controlling the ship and powering it. So if we kill him, the ship's going to fall out of the sky and we're all going to die. But if we don't defeat him, then he will destroy Sky Island and every single person living on it. But if we stay here and do nothing, he's going to take us someplace and we don't know where we're going and we will never find our way back. I don't know what to do. And she just kind of panics here. And Luffy takes the straw hat and tosses it, and it lands directly on her head. And he tells her to calm down. And there was a part of me that was like, don't you tell her to calm down, sir. But then another part of me that was kind of like, yeah, she needs to be talked down a little bit. She is sort of spinning out. So, yeah, he says, we are going to figure out a way to do this. So wipe that frown off of your face. And you are in the crew of the man who will be king of the pirates someday. So basically, you are a badass amongst badasses, and have a little bit more faith. And I love Eneru being like, the king of the pirates, so who's that guy? And Luffy says, the king of the sea. So Eneru says, so why don't we just settle things here? And we see the ship begin to crest the top of the trees in the woods that it's hidden in. All of these birds go up, which was a detail that I really kind of liked. I wasn't expecting that. And also the ship, it's not floating above and traveling through. It's just kind of cutting a path through the trees themselves. Like it can't quite get aloft. And we go underneath it and we see that all of the blades are digging into the stone and they're causing like this sort of avalanche underneath, but it's not rising up the way that they were expecting, or that he was expecting, I guess, really specifically. So we go back to Sky Island. We have all of these white berets who are helping people evacuate. And then we have this one old man who is the only one not running. And he says, if God says that we are supposed to die, maybe the only thing that makes sense is accepting God's judgment and dying. And the white beret is like, this man does not get to decide whether you live or die. We're not doing that. And he convinces him in pretty short order. But I did like that this segment of the population was, at least they tried to represent it a little bit. Because it's one thing for people to be told their island's going to be destroyed. it's another thing for people to be told their God isn't real or is real and is a monster shitbag human being with power. And there's going to be a lot more resistance to that than just, everybody suddenly turning tail. So I really did like that we have at least one guy who's kind of like, but what if this is God's will, So yeah, this is when fucking Eneru says, "Ah, yes, my weapon, which is named Death Pia. It means despair, and it'll save the world." Death Pia, sir, come now. That is janky. So anyway, we go inside the ship and we see all of these like tanks of liquid. And of course, he has just said what it is, but he does like the name of it, but he doesn't explain it. So all of a sudden, this huge black cloud begins to go up out the chimney of the ship. And I don't know what I thought this was. I think I was just expecting it to be like a gas attack of some kind. Not that kind. Lol. But like, like something poison. And I should have realized it wasn't going to be that simple because he intends to like destroy the island itself, from what I understand. It's not just about killing the life on the planet. It's more than that. But yeah, I thought that it was sort of a straightforward thing, and I wasn't even like really connecting it with his powers particularly. But yeah, so this black cloud begins to spread, and everybody is seeing it. We go to Robin, we go to Sky Island, we go to the Shandorans, and everybody is like, what the hell is that? Because it's pretty much like blotting out the sun. And then Eneru says, all the energy that this puts out into the air, I am in control of it, essentially. And he's just that fucking smirk. It's a thundercloud. With my energy, Deathpia discharges thunder clouds that have extremely turbulent currents. Soon, the clouds will cover all of Skypiea in darkness, while their energy continues to build. On my signal, they'll unleash dozens of thunderbolts that will obliterate everything in this nation. And then he says, allow me to demonstrate, and he points a finger in the air, and we get the first thunderbolt, which like slams into the top building on Sky Island, like the very tip, because it's all built on a hill. And it's honestly pretty scary and dramatic because of how chaotic it feels. He's got pinpoint precision in where he lands, but the lightning is like fluctuating all over the place as it's going off. We see people, there's still tons of people like in the streets, and probably he definitely killed some folks in that one stroke. He was just making a point. But yeah, this whole this moment for me, I felt like more threatened by him as a baddie than a lot of the others we've ever seen. And Eneru started off feeling a little bit janky to me. He wasn't, I don't know, he just didn't really do it for me. I think it was the laughing, honestly. Like a villain who just laughs all the time when there's not really a reason to be laughing. There's a way to do that is genuinely like creepy or threatening, and he doesn't really do it for me. But once I get to see like the overall plan that he's working here and what he's doing, I have to admit this is pretty well thought out for his abilities, and I think that he could carry this out much more easily than some of the other like more intense plans that I have seen before. So anyway, we cut to Conus because she is leaving the island, and she looks over her shoulder and sees this like building burning, and we go back to Eneru and Nami and Luffy, and Nami says, what did you just do? And he says, I was just teasing the angels a little. Nobody's used the word angels to talk about them before, right? That's like a little joke, I think. I just, you can't help but see them that way. But nobody's used that word explicitly. as far as I can remember. So, of course, this leads to him and Luffy, like, talking about whether or not it's okay for him to just destroy everything because he thinks he's God. And they start to get back into their fight. So this is when Luffy goes into, what does he call it? Gum Gum Daze. So he starts to avoid Eneru's thrusts of his trident, which is like solidified lightning, essentially. Just out of pure instinct. And the way that his facial features change to indicate that he is in daze mode, I feel like could potentially be problematic, but I'm not going to focus too much on that. I think that you guys know what I'm saying here. But yeah, what he is saying is, because Nami realizes what he's doing, he's like, I can avoid him, but I can't seem to attack him, like with that mindset in place of I'm just acting on instinct. Attacking doesn't like work with that. So then he does something. He blows his head up and says, "Gum Gum Octopus." And we cut to from Nami's POV, and his legs have gotten long like tentacles and are just sort of like laying awkwardly on the ground. I do not know what he was intending to do here. Did he intend to squirt like ink? That's not even octopi, is it? That's squid. Or do octopi do it too, huh? But anyway, I didn't even know what he was like thinking. But what he ends up doing successfully is he goes to a different part of the ship and he begins to do his like Gatling gun punching on the ship. And what this does, very clever, instead of a direct attack where he is sending his fists at, the enemy in particular ways to try and get them, this is just going to cause a wild ricochet that he doesn't have any control over, and thus you won't be able to read his mind and detect his movements because it's not up to him. None of it is within his actual control. So at first, Eneru is running through and really seems to be like, this is no problem. You're not learning your lesson. This didn't work last time. And then all of a sudden, all of these fists begin to connect and we see his face change and he's just like, wait, what? And he gets decked and goes flying. This is another moment where Nami, it's a ricochet, and she's explaining everything. So then Luffy does the thing. He runs out to Eneru and then has his hands like he's holding the doors behind him as he runs towards Eneru. So his arms stretch out behind him by like 30 feet. And then he just lets go and his hands come flying forward and punch Eneru in the gut and the man goes down. And I love this so much. Luffy is running toward him and Eneru is like struggling to his feet saying, no, I have to escape. And then he looks up and Luffy's got his fists spinning. Gum Gum Rifle. And you see Eneru start that like scream face again. And it just cuts and it says the end. And it was great. It was very fun. So yeah, I'm delighted. I think this was a really fun couple of episodes. All right, guys, I'm going to wrap, but thank you again so much for coming and hanging out with me. And thank you, Gabriela, for commissioning this. Hope you're feeling better. And until next time, everybody, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.